time about this subject. There's always a big debate when it comes to spanking. And a new study from right here in Texas sheds some light on whether or not it's effective. Jason Miles connects the dots.
To spank or not to spank has been an ongoing debate for many parents. Now a new study says using physical punishment on kids can do real harm later in life. Let's connect the dots. Scientists have been studying the effects of spanking and physical punishment on children for decades. And in that time, research linked severe discipline to behavioral and psychological problems. So much so that the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a new policy in 2018 saying that physical punishment not only didn't work, but also did damage. Despite that research, some question whether or not those children who were spanked would have turned out antisocial anyway, thanks to a genetic predisposition. So now a professor at the University of Texas has taken on the nature versus nurture debate in a new study that looked at twins, including over 400 pairs of identical twins, many of whom were disciplined differently by their parents. So what did this Texas researcher find? For identical twins who were punished differently, the twins subjected to spanking or yelling was more likely to eventually show antisocial behavior. In fact, the professor went so far to say harsh punishment was linked to more behavior problems, not fewer. Connecting the dots, I'm Jason Miles for H-Town Rush.